Live from the Julius Arthur Leonard Studios in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's TC at Home, presented by Theater Charlotte. I'm your host, Chris Timmons. Welcome to a special edition of TC at Home. On today's show, we are going to meet some of the creative team behind Quarantine the Musical and talk about what it has been like as a non-performing artist during quarantine. If you have any questions for our guests this evening, please put those in the comments and we will do our best to answer those during the broadcast. So let's introduce our guests this evening. First up, she's been involved with Theater Charlotte's Summer Youth Program for the past 2 years. You've seen her work on our main stage in shows such as The Producers and during A Christmas Carol. She is the choreographer for Quarantine the Musical. Please welcome Laz. Hey, Laz.
Hey, Chris.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, yeah.
All right, our next guest has been working with our TC Junior and STG programs as well for the past several years. Her work includes Aida and Peter and the Starcatcher. She serves as the costume lab manager at UNCC. Please welcome our costume designer, Hali Hutchinson-Houk. There we go. Did I get your...
How? It's okay. Oh, it's new.
Okay. I've been working on that all week, and I knew when the time came, I would mess it up. So my apologies.
That's okay. Hey, everyone.
All right. The work of our next artist has been seen in Jesus Christ Superstar, The Grapes of Wrath, and The Addams Family at Theater Charlotte. He can also be found at UNCC as senior lecturer in lighting design. We have with us our lighting designer, Gordon Olson.
Gordon. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, I need
good to see you all.
This, don't I? I need some audience reaction.
And cheers and clapping.
There you go.
I love all these people.
And our last guest is one of the longest tenured theater artists in Charlotte. You have seen his work at Children's Theater, where he is the scenic artist on staff. You have also seen his work on stage for the opera and once upon a time, Charlotte Rep. He is our scenic designer for Quarantine the Musical. Please welcome in Tim Parati.
Hello.
I hope I didn't embarrass you, saying that you've been around for so long in this town.
Yeah, just talking about how old I am. That's fine.
But no, I mean,
would you say mature? What did you say?
There you go. Yes, that works. That's fine. But this is a city that likes its shiny new things, and to have been involved in the arts community in Charlotte for so long really says a lot. I mean, we just lost another longtime arts, the Manor Theater. You and I have seen work together briefly at Charlotte Rep, and we watched that go. And for Charlotte to be the city of this size and not have professional theater is really kind of a shame. And you've seen the landscape change.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Children's Theater has been around for 70-something years now, which is good. And Theater Charlotte's still around after 90 years, so that's pretty good. We're still, those two are chugging along. Just wish the others could keep going, and hopefully this isn't knocking out some of the smaller groups. So
yeah, absolutely. So for our audience tonight, if anybody has questions for any of our artists this evening, as a collective or individually, go ahead and send those in, and we will do our best to answer them as we go. But the first thing I want to start with, and Laz, we'll start with you, and we'll just kind of go around. But talk about your involvement in the local theater community. What attracted you to Charlotte? How did you end up here?
I kind of fell back into Charlotte. I grew up in the Lake Norman, Morrisville area, and then traveled the world a little bit. And then I was kind of like, I don't want to be in Morrisville, but I would like to be in a city. And so I came to Charlotte. And from there, it kind of just, I don't know, it was home when I didn't want it to be. And it kind of kept pulling me in. And then I had, obviously, Ron, made a great relationship with him through Open Door. And I'd never thought theater was part of my path. And then Theater Charlotte completely kind of flipped that on its head. And here I am with you lovely people. So yeah, it was a beautiful journey.
Wow. So your theater experience then started recently. You're very new to the, is that right? Is that
Yeah. I mean, I guess as a kid, I was always like, oh, I want to be on Broadway. And I like focused in dance and I thought that'd be cool, but I really sucked at singing. Like anyone who's been in a musical with me knows that. It's fine. So, and so it wasn't really my path. And then, you know, just life. And so when Ron was like, hey, do a show. And I was like, I have no idea how to do that, but sure, why not? And then I ended up kind of falling in love with it. And it's a part of me now, and I'm really grateful for that. So
great. Yeah. Hallie, let's move over to you.
So I ended up in Charlotte for the job that I have at UNC Charlotte. I was in grad school in Southern Mississippi at the University of Southern Mississippi. I'm originally from South Florida. So, and I met my husband in Mississippi. His family lived on the coast. So when I got this job, it was a nice kind of cross between the insanity of South Florida and like a little bit more laid back in Mississippi. So Charlotte's been like a nice intersection of like Southern, but north enough and city-y. And then I ended up at Theater Charlotte. I wish I could remember who specifically was from work said, hey, they're looking for, because there are several of us who work at Theater Charlotte, but somebody had told me that you guys were looking for somebody to do the summer season.
I'm going to bet that it was Rick Mull.
Probably. Usually Rick. It's usually Rick. Yeah. So either he told you or he told me, and then yeah. So I've been there pretty much since I moved to Charlotte with you guys, and I love Theater Charlotte and everybody that ever works there, and the team and everybody on the cast is always just super excited to be there. So I love calling it my outside of work theater home in Charlotte. So yeah.
Excellent. All right, Gordon, let's move it on to you.
So I had been working, I've been in Charlotte now for almost 9 years. And I had been working a couple years prior to working at UNCC. I had been working just sort of freelance. So it was a whole lot of trying to string one contract into another contract, which probably a lot of theater people are. Sorry, my daughter's wanting to be in the show for a second. You want to say hello?
Welcome all.
There you go. Okay.
Hi.
There you go. All right. Yeah, it's a narwhal. Yeah. Okay. All right. Can we talk now? All right. Thank you. Okay.
It's a family show. That's fine.
Sorry.
Live TV.
Yeah. So I had been with Florida Grand Opera for 3 years, and then I was sort of done in Miami, and I was freelancing for about 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years. And freelancing is really hard. For those that don't know in the theater community, you're just sort of trying to string contracts together. Oftentimes there's no health insurance. You know, if a job falls through, if a show gets canceled, if any number of things can change. And it was just tough. I spent a little bit of time in New York City. I worked there quite a bit. And then I was getting married. I asked my wife to marry me, and we got married. And literally like the week after our wedding, which was in Nashville, I was sort of freelancing out of Nashville. I got the job offer from UNC Charlotte. So literally we were like, we're married and we're also moving. And so then, then we came right over. So I've been with UNCC since then, as a lecturer in lighting design. And then I think it was probably about 2 years there before I finally sort of met Chris, and started working with Theater Charlotte. And it's been great ever since. I take as many jobs there as I can get, because like Hallie said, it's a great sort of family and community, and just sort of really everyone's always really enthusiastic about the work, which is sort of can be really invigorating. Some of the companies that I work with, it's like, we got to get to opening night, and then there's this sort of like this grind to it. And while I love the work, there's something really nice about seeing so many people that are so excited about the work sort of time after time, which is nice. And a lot of young talent, obviously, you know, Renee Rapp and people like that come through and sort of get their legs under them and get out, which is really, really nice. So.
All right, Tim.
it's time for bed.
A little one around your house somewhere too. Are we going to see her at some point?
She is downstairs. We have a almost 2-year-old toddler who you might hear through the walls. I don't know. What's the question? How did I come to Theater Charlotte?
I mean, and
What am I
again,
doing?
you've got a different perspective because of your history, but sort of how did you end up, your involvement, getting involved in the theater community, and, in Charlotte?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm a native Charlottean, which is rare. Both Kim, my wife, and I are both
very
both
rare.
Were born and grew up in Charlotte. I did live in New York for a little while too, but I came back down here because there was more film work and things. Because I am an actor as well, so I came back down for the film work. So I've been around. I went to UNCC as an acting student and did a lot of great shows there. And then when I graduated, just jumped into local theater, the North Carolina Stage Company, which is also long gone, and Charlotte Rep, and the Charlotte Shakespeare Company was involved in creating that. And so just been around for a long time. I only was on stage at Theater Charlotte one time right after college, and it was a really, really bad show called Deer World. It was a musical version of The Mad Woman of Chaillot. And I was just in the chorus, but it was a really bad show. No offense to anybody who
Times of change. If you haven't been to Theater Charlotte in a while,
yeah, no, it's anyway. So I've never been on stage, but over the last recent years, I've gotten back in touch, and I've known Chris since Charlotte Rep days. But when my wife Kim was hired to direct Raisin in the Sun a few seasons ago, she insisted that I come with her as scene designer. So she was my way in, I guess. And so we did that. And then the next year I did Ain't Misbehavin', I guess last season. And this season we were currently working on Cat on a Hat Tin Roof. And the set, I understand, is still sitting there. It's not painted yet, but it's still sitting on the stage waiting to see what happens. Yeah, very sad. And because it was going to be a really great show, and Dennis Delmar's directing, and we were going to have a great time. And
yeah,
it's just, I don't know. So
yeah, we were, and this, we'll get into this too. I want to talk about kind of where everybody was when we got to this point, but yeah, we were a week away from opening that show, and we, I had just sat in on a dress rehearsal. I was serving as lighting designer on the show, and it was an incredible rehearsal. And Dennis mentioned that after that rehearsal, and he's mentioned it several times since then, that he felt like that night things really started coming together for that show. And yeah, here we are. Some of
great set.
Yeah,
a great set. I'm just saying.
Some of you have touched on this a little bit, but I want to kind of go around and say, for those that are maybe thinking about a career, or maybe are coming out of school and want to do what each of you are doing, how do you go about doing it? We don't audition like performers do. We don't go into a room and audition for a role, so we sort of have to approach things a little bit differently. So the question is, how do we go about doing that? And did you find it difficult to do in this community? Hali, let's start with you.
Wow. Well, I can't imagine graduating right now. So, sorry for all those that are, but just being frank. So it's most likely going to be a little difficult because a lot of the connections that a lot of people make for jobs, particularly those who want to freelance, are in summer stock. And summer stock's not running in most places this summer. But what I'm seeing a lot of, I have a handful of people that I know that just graduated, and what they're doing is drawing. Luckily, it's 2020, and you have the internet and different media platforms for you to get your work out there in some way, shape, or form. So some of these new graduates are putting out amazing content, designing shows for the sake of designing them in their home, creating a concept, showing that they have the creativity still, and just honing that, because it is a skill and you get better at it. And if we have time to sit inside, and how many times you're like, yeah, I'd really like to work on my watercolors, but I never have time to just experiment. Now is the time to do it. Personally, I stink at digital rendering, and that is my goal for the summer now, is to work on that for myself. So I think it's going to be patience, and which sucks, but just being frank also. But I think it's maintaining those connections and finding other ways to express yourself artistically. And and also keep sewing, especially as technicians. I know a lot of them are making masks or gowns, and you can see that coming out of the New York shops and all over the country, which is amazing. Or just start sewing for yourself. I have a friend who made themselves an 18th century corset because they had the time to do it. So, and that's another technical element you can add in your portfolio. So I think it's just a lot of portfolio building and remembering that this isn't going to last forever.
Mm-hmm. All right, Gordon, let's move it on to you.
Well, since Hali talked a little bit about what we're living through right now, I'll bare my soul a little bit and talk a little bit about my own journey and then about coming out of school. I will say to anybody coming out right now, and let's just sort of take the framework of COVID out of the boards and say, like, we're in a normal operating environment. The advice I would say is that you need to build the connections and the relationships. And the reason I say that very, very notably for myself is that I was not one that did that very well coming out of school. I sort of felt like I got to work real hard and I'm going to design great, and that should stand for itself. And there's nothing wrong with that mentality, but I am an introvert by nature. I struggle a great deal with being extroverted with people, and for let's go have a drink after a show, or let's have a coffee for a meeting, and those things I am not good at. But that's where a lot of relationships in theater are built and forged and carry forward, after a really difficult rehearsal, when everybody goes and gets a drink, or when everybody has a bite to eat before rehearsal, you're going to find a lot of connections get made there, and those connections will carry you forward. In the time of right now, in the time of COVID, a little bit like Hallie's talking about, the nice thing that's happened, certainly in the last, 5-6 years, is that lighting software is sort of now is much more approachable from a design standpoint. You can visualize whole shows on your computer, on your laptop at home, and design lighting stuff that may never see the light of day, much like Hallie's talking about. But there's literally entire virtual, lighting rigs that you can put together and see it all programmed. And I know that there's a lot of young programmers that are coming out of colleges right now that are putting their stuff online. That's like, here's this entire 5-minute song that I just built a whole lighting look to, and it's got all types of concert looks to it that is just happening on their laptop. It's not happening anywhere else. And that's a skill set that's great. And the other thing that I'll just say generally, and this is something I try to tell my students a lot at UNCC and wherever else I have students, is that, like, New York isn't the end all be all of where theater gets done. And I too, coming out of undergraduate school specifically, I was kind of like, New York's the only place to be. And there's so much great work done locally and regionally and just nationally that has merit, that has worth, that pays the bills, that is somewhat frowned upon by sort of the elites in the business, which is kind of unfortunate, because I think a lot of people get into their heads like this sort of mythical aura, and that's something that can kind of hurt people a little bit. But yeah, there's a ton of great work being done out there, and certainly, like I said, the virtual platforms that are available right now are great. So
yeah, I had somebody tell me one time that anybody with a checkbook can produce a show in New York. So there you go. All right, Tim, let's move over to you.
Yeah, I come to what I do kind of from a different angle, because I did not go to school for scene design or scene painting. I kind of just fell into the scene painting, and actually even into the design, because I was with the, like I said, the Charlotte Shakespeare Company, and we were just all people from UNCC that decided to put this group together. And literally one day we were talking about the set for, I think it was Taming of the Shrew, and they said, well, you can draw, why don't you paint the set? And I said, okay. So I did, and then we just started doing our own things. And then I got over to the Opera at Carolina and kind of worked with a woman who was working there for years and years and learned a lot from her. And so I just kind of fell into scene painting, and then the design kind of came out of that. So, but I do know that places like Cobalt Studios is a great place to go for to learn scene painting if that's the direction you want to go in. You go and you can do all levels of things. It's upstate New York, and there are several other institutions or places that you can go to get an education in scene painting, because it's really hands-on for painting. I mean, you can do it on the computer, but it's not really the same. And that's kind of this whole thing about this pandemic, is like a lot of shows are moving online, but the scenery is getting left back on the stage because everybody just pops up a picture of whatever they want to behind them. So the scenery part, all the building and the painting and all that, is kind of getting left behind, because you can choreograph, you can light, you can do all kinds of things. But anyway, but if you're coming out of school right now wanting to go in that, I would highly recommend, if you want to go into scene painting, places like Cobalt Studios and some other places, or certainly further education into a further grad school or something else, to just learn as much as you can. And if you are stuck at home, then get out your paints and just try scenic painting techniques at home. Mm-hmm. As far as design goes, yeah, the same thing as Gordon and Hali were talking about, just design your own shows and make your own portfolios and websites and Instagram. I mean, you get a lot of attention from your online presence now. And as Gordon was also saying, just the connections you make through shows. I've gotten a lot of jobs through people that have come through children's theater that I painted for, and they said, hey, come paint our set or come design for us. So it's just keeping connections and not burning bridges and being nice to each other.
Ross?
Okay, so choreographer, I think, first of all, that has like so many realms outside of theater, which is what I think is cool. I knew since I was like 7, so as I was able to conceptualize like a career that I wanted to choreograph. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I spent a lot of time in my room with a pen and paper and colored markers and created formations and magic and these imaginary things. So as of now, if you're stuck at home, do that. It's still efficient. As far as like a career goes as a choreographer, I think you're gonna have a lot of moments where people are gonna tell you you can't, and people are gonna tell you you're not good enough, and all these things. And if you know that you are, and you know you can, keep going, because someone's gonna see it eventually. Okay, like no matter what you're doing, someone is gonna see that you've got it. If you know in your heart and you keep going. And then I think the coolest thing about me as a choreographer is like, I've always known that was right, but like, trust me, I've gone on like every back alleyway of my career that you can imagine. And since I feel like I became a true choreographer, which is probably about 4 years ago, every job I've ever gotten, I've never applied for. I've always gotten it because someone really loved me and they said, hey, you should talk to this girl. Like, I really like her. And then Ron is like an amazing example of that. Like Theater Charlotte got me into so many other jobs, which have gotten me into this and into that. And it truly goes to show, I mean, and Hali, I've worked with you, and Gordon, I've worked with you, Tim, hopefully future I've worked with you, and Chris, I've worked with you. And it's that same thing of like, when people work with you and they feel value from you, and you'll have everything you want if you just keep being true and honest and do good work and like keep believing in yourself, even when like no one else does, is that it does come together. So just like get through the crap moments, because they suck, but like you'll be fine. That's
and Chris, if I could add something, Chris, because sometimes I'll talk to classes with students for acting, and they're always like, well, how do I get into acting and all? And it's really just learn as many skills as you can in the theater. If you want to work in the theater, you're going to get a lot more opportunities to work if you can also do lighting, and you can do costumes, and you can do painting. There's several people that we hire at Children's Theater that work different shows in different aspects. So, and if not, have a really good side job that is flexible and something that you can do anywhere, no matter where you go, and quickly, not just waiting tables, but any other kind of skills you can have, because you have to pay the rent, you have to eat, and it might be a long time before theater jobs, whether it's acting or designing or whatever. So the more multi-talented you can be, or the more jobs you can do in the theater, the more skills you have, the chances are you will work longer in the theater.
Yeah,
unless a pandemic comes along, and then
Yeah, and if I can piggyback off that with like choreography, like never say you can't do, like try something different in that same realm, and like be willing to do a whole musical when you've never even tried that. Like go for it, because you don't know until you try something new, and you might fail, or talk to the right people and let them teach you something and let them like help you grow, because that's all it is. It's all growth. It's really beautiful. I think that's a wonderful point, Tim. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the passion, just to see the passion in all of your faces and what you're saying. And I hope that people appreciate that when they sit down and they watch this, whenever they watch it, if they're watching now or watching it later. I hope they see that, especially those that are coming up through the ranks now, who are looking to get into the field. That passion is really ultimately what drives each of us. So I'm gonna, as I look at this ticker down at the bottom that says an in-depth look at Quarantine the Musical, I'm gonna sort of sidestep that for a second, because for anybody that's really interested to see where we are in the process for that show, we've had performers on the past couple of weeks, so now we're getting a chance to sort of see what our creative team is doing. And I kind of want to start with, maybe talk about where you are in the process, and maybe a little bit about the challenges of doing something right now that's virtual, with the hopes that down the road this can be done for real in a live setting. Talk a little bit about that, where you are in the process and how it's been challenging. Tim, let's start with you.
Well, the first step I always take in design is just research. Just go with gut instincts first. That always has kind of helped me. And then just do a lot of research about where you are, what time of year, what year is it? I mean, every possible thing. Just look for research. Just go on Google and just type in all kinds of different things and see what comes up, and then gather all that together. And so that's always like the first step of the design. And then, just like I said, a lot of times for me, the gut instinct is, if it's not what winds up happening in the show, there's some of that in there. So just start sketching out things and not worrying about scale or budget or anything else. Just kind of trying to get the ideas out there. And of course, you have to talk to your director, because the director has the concept. You can be thinking all kinds of things, but if you and the director are on the same page, it's not going to matter, because the director is going to win. So for Quarantine, I don't know. I've just been thinking about it a lot. I think
research is pretty easy. It's right in front of our faces right now.
It's right in front of our faces. And I will say this too, that I know there's now challenges of a lot of like at Children's Theater, we just did our onstage shows, which normally would be 4 shows in the theaters at Imaginon, with 45 kids in each show, and costumes, full costumes, and lighting and scenery and everything else. They just did it online, and so there were some very talented people editing. So that's a whole new aspect of theater, is how to put all this together online. And like I said, scenery might not be so much, but we could always take scene designs and pop them up behind you or whatever. But so for Quarantine the Musical, I'm not sure. The futuristic dystopian dream ballet has got me stumped. I'm not sure how to do that.
I can't wait.
We're going to have to work on that, to have everything destroyed and then come back, or Are we having an intermission? I don't even know.
The visual impact that, I mean, just having read the script and seeing what I see in my head, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with, because yeah, you're right. There's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah. And it depends on how long it is, and how many people are in it and everything. So yeah, the editing of the Zoom shows now is the challenge, and I think that people are doing a pretty good job with it, from what I've seen, all the way from whatever the show Some Good News has pretty good things going on with the cast of Hamilton and everything. And you get to see a lot of people's houses inside of their own houses, which is good.
Yeah, that's what I've been fascinated with, seeing what people have on their bookcases and trying to figure out what room are you in? what room is that?
And a lot of people have guitars on their wall.
Yeah.
I admit that.
That's my dad. So.
Okay. It's very well lit.
I'm not multi-talented, guys.
Ali, let's move over to you for a minute. So yeah, tell us a little bit about, where you are in the process, or your process for Quarantine the Musical, and sort of some of the challenges that you're facing with this kind of production.
Well, at the beginning stages, doing research about what the world is, but given, like you said, Chris, the world is right in front of us. There's a lot of research, just having Zoom chats with my family and things like that. But then also, now that it's cast, it makes it a lot easier for me, because I can see who was put in those roles. So that helps me kind of create with the actors what that role is going to be. The great thing of this being an original musical is there's no expectations of who Omar is or anything like that. So I don't have to worry about some sort of lasting impression that I'm ruining for somebody who wanted Belle to be in a yellow dress or something like that. So, so that's nice in this process. Right now, it's kind of a lot of research and hurry up and wait. I can't measure anybody, and not saying that Tim and Gordon don't have difficult jobs, but Laz and I have to get very close to people. And it's very frustrating to not be able to do that kind of level of just conversation and also fittings. So I've had all the actors send me their clothing sizes that they would have bought at home. We didn't do any extensive measurement sheets because it'll most likely all be shopped. And depending on what our timeline ends up being when we can actually all see each other in person, will determine if I kind of do virtual fittings with them in their homes through their closets, or if we end up I do some sort of crazy run to stock. Right now, it's hard to overly plan what that fitting process will look like, and trying not to get bogged down by the details of dressing rooms and all of that. But it's been fun, and there are some notes in the script that kind of guide what those characters would be. I can see Omar, since he's learning how to knit with his grandma, maybe having some sort of knit scarf, even though it's middle of summer. I don't know, something like that. Favorite color's blue, things like that, to kind of inform that. But yeah, it's kind of the preliminary things.
Good. Laz, back to you.
Cool. Okay. So obviously, choreographing anything without actual bodies is interesting. The good thing is actually when I do choreograph, I choreograph via numbers and the space that I'm going to be given to create in. So when I'm given anything, once I know who my people are in play, I usually do kind of a crazy thing of where I sit for hours with one song, and I keep seeing visions and visions and visions, and I have a grid. I probably should have brought that with me. I'm sorry I didn't. But I create a grid-like formation. So basically what acts as that is that each color in my grids are different movement things. And so, eventually I guess the goal would be, once everything has been created, that whoever's in which color grid would learn my movement virtually. And then we could take that into the stage. So logical, but not logical, because if anyone's worked with me, they also know I will change things and if I hate them when they're actually on the stage. But that is definitely the starting point of any work that I've done. So in a weird way, this kind of functions really well with what I do anyways. I usually map everything out before I get into the space. And so when we're in the space, the map will happen, and then I'll change as I need to. And so, yeah, and now, but if we have to take it on video, then we'd have a whole nother conversation. I guess I'd start from scratch at that. But hopefully we'll get in person soon enough to make that happen.
Great. Gordon?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny doing this process remotely. First of all, we're usually all sitting around a table and sharing information like this. So for people that are logging on that don't know what this looks like, this is so foreign to a lot of us. The other hard thing on my end is that lighting for most people, and honestly, a surprising number of directors, it's kind of one of the hardest things in theater to get your head around. From a scenic design standpoint, there's sketches and there's renderings. There might be models. From a costume standpoint, the same thing. This is what she's going to be wearing. This is what he's going to be wearing. This is what we want them to look like. There's usually sort of target goals that you're reaching for, and lighting is a little bit different. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's software coming along that I can kind of render things out and make things look more or less like I want them to. But from a process standpoint, I too start with research. And there's obviously a ton of research, like everybody's saying right now in front of us. I think, I don't know, for those of you that have been on Zoom calls lately, but I myself am situated, there's a lot of bright light behind me, and there's like tons of avenues we can go down from a lighting standpoint. I know that there's groups of people out there are individuals out there that are struggling with feeling very isolated. Even just the term social distancing is sort of exhausting mentally and physically. So if we're in a space, how do we realize that with lighting? Well, we might only light them from one side. We might give them very stark shadows. We might put them in a very confined space that doesn't feel very expansive. Things like that in the lighting world can be defined very, very well and very, very easily. My job as a lighting designer is to keep you as the audience looking where I want you to be looking and where the director wants you to be looking and not looking anywhere else. It's a little bit like a magician in ways that I want you to look over here. I don't want you to look over there while someone's entering or exiting, or as we're bringing on new scenery or things like that. Similarly too, right now, the fun thing, or not, none of this is fun, let's be honest. But the interesting thing that's going on right now is that you're seeing a lot of people who may not put themselves out there in a performative way, really put themselves out there. Something about like, I've just got my laptop in front of me and I'm stuck in my house. And from a lighting standpoint, that could be a great moment on stage to realize, like, here we are in this small little box. I'm very confined and I'm very small. And then I start singing, and like, we can just light the whole stage up with color and really expand it out and really broaden it out, which could be a lot of fun too. So my research usually involves a lot of Google searching, like Tim said. I will usually bring in a whole bunch of images of, this moment, this moment, this moment. And I will very early on start taking apart the script and looking for, moments that we want to highlight and talking with the director about how do we want to pick this moment out or get from A to B or things like that. And that's kind of the whole process for me, considering this in a virtual environment. If we were to say, well, quarantine's happening all via Zoom, and what does that look like, is something that would be a fun challenge to take on. Obviously, Laz is up there. But her room looks vastly different from Hallie's, looks vastly different from Tim's. So it's how do you embody those moments, and then how would you realize them if we were to translate them to the stage? There's always the one person in the Zoom room that is like, I'm sitting in front of a really bright window and I'm totally black and you can't see me. And like, there's something funny about that because like, well, there's light near me, I should be visible, but that's not really how light works. So, there's things to certainly explore and sort of have fun with, which would be great.
Excellent.
I think that would be the challenge of it, is to coordinate. If you really wanted to do something other than just pop up some online pictures behind us, but for me and Gordon to say, like, coordinate and maybe say some cast members get like certain colors behind them, and we would have to, I guess, also just maybe have lights coming from different directions to hit certain pieces that they might be able to construct in their house or something. And or maybe that, we could have a few pieces made and get delivered to these places and wiped down and sterilized. But, I think that would be the key, is to coordinate something that is unusual and something that would make sense, that would be in everyone's place, or find a place in your own house that looks very similar to everybody else's or something. Or, you know, I love the lighting behind Laws, and even Chris, you got some cool angles going on and some different shades of things going on. So those are pretty cool.
Things that we angst over, like we're going to be on camera. How can we make it look good behind us? You know, other people out there probably aren't paying one bit of attention.
I have a selfie light at my place, but I'm at my family's place. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So just again, a reminder, again, thank you all. We've got a couple more questions. But if for anybody, if you've got questions for our artists specifically or generally, go ahead and send those in. I'm going to share a comment from Ron. And my next, I'm going to sort of start with Hali and Gordon. Talk a little bit about what it was like at UNCC, you know, as things started shutting down. You know, what were you guys working on, and how did that transition to remote learning and teaching for the two of you? Talk a little bit about that transition.
Yeah. Well, when we started hearing that there was a possibility of us moving online, we were about to start, or I think that lighting was in focus for our spring dance concert. So we were still building costumes and finishing fittings and making sure everything was good in hopes that it was still going to happen. And maybe, Gordon, was it Thursday that we just found out? It was Thursday that we found out that we weren't going to be doing the productions for that following week, but we still had Q to Q rehearsal that evening as well as the next day, and we had a run planned on Saturday. I think we were dark on Sunday, but we were trying to figure out how to make sure that the students still had some sort of experience or some sort of period to put on the end of this production that they had worked hard on, and we tried to do it in that truncated space. So we ended up doing a very limited audience, like I think there were maybe 30 people.
Yeah, we basically allowed like every cast member, like one person could come watch our like first final only dress performance of the show. So it was tough. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was just going to be a hair and makeup run. And they were all going to so they all ended up wearing their costumes and did their hair and makeup too, and they recorded it, and they did end up putting out the link so that people's families and friends could see it, as well as like anybody who was planning on going, which was awesome, because that's not what we were able to do for Pippin, which was our major musical that we were in the middle of working on for the end of the semester. So we kept working on that with hopes that we would do it someday, and then kind of put the pause on it maybe a month into quarantine.
Yeah. So yeah, I was lighting designing for the spring dance concert. It was heartbreaking. I mean, all week long, you know, there was sort of that trickle of like, are we still doing this? Are we still doing this? How are we still doing this? And then it was like the NBA canceled their season, and the NCAA was like, oh my gosh. And so, you know, there was a real push by the dance department to have their students perform, which is completely understandable. I mean, these young people had worked so hard. But it was heartbreaking, you know, and it was like, listen, you can't even have, you know, all of your friends come and see it. You get to have one or two. And that was like the end of it, was rough. And then at the same time, just on my own side, and Hali mentioned briefly, but I was also scene designing Pippin at that time. So I had spent my spring break painting a whole lot of Pippin scenery and ordering a whole bunch of stuff. And our TD Matthew Frazier had built a whole bunch of stuff. And that whole show, you know, much like Tim's right now and yours there at Theater Charlotte, is just sort of sitting in frozen suspended animation in our shop. I don't think it will be on. We may get it on stage in a year or two, but right now it's just kind of hanging out, which is sort of hard for me. I mean, it was it was a really big project for me, and it was, you know, a lot of students were very excited about it. It's a big sort of all college encompassing theater department of music and dance. We're all very involved. So to see all of that come to a crashing halt was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, you know, and I'm sure Hali can speak to this too, but UNCC was, they were very reluctant to make the switch to online. And then it was like, oh, now we're going online. And it was Thursday. And it was Monday that we were supposed to be back online teaching. And I personally had a very hard time getting my head around how do I I mean, it was like teaching through triage, and there's been, for those that don't know, I mean, there's been a ton of discussion in how, what does online teaching look like versus what is we just get. And all of us that did this were like, this isn't online teaching. This is us making the best out of a difficult situation. So that's been a lot. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
No, I was just saying, you guys are such hands-on. That's
right.
That's the thing. Right. It's such a hands-on environment.
Yeah, and that was what I'm going to touch on briefly. Gordon and I both teach a class called Practicum.
Sorry, we're getting it. I'm going to try and find it. Go ahead.
Okay. So I teach a class called Practicum, and so does Gordon, one section, and it's basically a hands-on class. We're working on the production that's happening. So now we moved online, and our productions are canceled. So what are we going to learn? So for my class, at the beginning of the semester, I had kind of had them do a brief survey about things that they would be interested in learning over the course of the semester, if there was a possibility that they could, not promising anything. And one person said, I'm really into cosplay. Another person said, I would really love to learn some like natural fiber stuff. So luckily, we found out on Thursday. My class is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I emailed all my students right away on Thursday and said, you all better show up at class tomorrow because you need to take some stuff home. So they took home stuff we ended up doing 3 at-home projects, as well as like other like things that we learned on our online platform called Canvas. And then I ended up mailing them supplies for the 3rd project. So they took 2 home, and I surveyed them at the end of class. And besides me, their only complaints were me not being good at Canvas, which is totally fair because I had just learned how to use it. And I'll work on that over the summer should we need it in the fall. But yeah, I got lucked out that all 8 students, if they weren't continuously engaged, there was definitely drop-off periods, mostly because some had to take on tasks like helping to educate their younger siblings from home or working a lot more now that they could / they had to. So, but they all did a really great job, and it was kind of a blessing in that way. And it also helped to have our units pretty close, and we kind of bounced ideas off of each other, which helped a lot.
Laz, let's jump over to you. What, did you have projects that you were working on? Tell us where you were in that process, and then maybe if you had something that transitioned over to virtual learning.
My whole world got flipped upside down pretty rapidly. I was actually was supposed to open Mary Poppins with Providence High School the Friday after they canceled all after-school activities. Actually, in the middle of our dress rehearsal we were having was when the announcement came out, and it was like kind of makes me want to cry having to watch these kids finish something they'd been working on heavily. It was not an easy show. Watching the lead, who I'm very close with, Grace Geiger, who I met through Theater Charlotte, her earth shattered. She was Mary Poppins, and she was devastated. And so it was really sad. I know we are still working together with Providence to hopefully get some version of that for them, but I don't think it'll ever be the same. And it was awful. And then beyond that, I do work in competitive dance. And if you don't know anything, sorry, my dog is like whining in the background, but if you don't know anything about competitive dance, they basically train from summer to December, and then from January to April they compete. And maybe some of them got to do their dances once. A lot of the competition community did not get to do any of their dances that they worked hard for, that their families paid great money for, to do great choreography. And so I have a lot of dancers who didn't get to complete any projects. seniors that had hopes and dreams of some different things and transitioning. So it was, it's been really rough. But I will say, I will compliment the dance industry in an amazing way of the resilience and the positivity that's come out of it, and the free online classes that have come out to take. I mean, even for myself as a dancer, I'm like, oh my God, I would have never been able to take this class. So there is something exceptional that's happening within the dance community that's so special and beautiful. I think it's well within the theater community, even what we're doing here. But it definitely doesn't take away from the fact that there is like some serious heartbreak that happened that not so beautiful day in March, I would say, for us here. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Tim, I know you talked about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and you've had several projects lined up, I know, with Children's Theater. And even the other day when I was texting with you, you said you had some deadlines. So tell us about what you were in the middle of.
Yeah, I was actually juggling like 3 shows at the time, and in various stages. One was Cat on the Hot Tin Roof, which is very close to getting done. Children's Theater was preparing Dragons Love Tacos, which was going to be a really great show, I think. And we were almost done with the set, and I got it up on the stage, and I had not painted the floor yet, but because I was waiting for the walls to get in place, and so I'm glad I didn't spend all night painting the floor. But that show has been postponed till next season, so we will just keep the set and do it next year. The disappointment over at Children's Theater, we were going to do Annie in the fall. It was the first time we were ever going to do Annie, and they just decided it's not the time to do it. Our staff over there is just daily on top of everything, and in talks with other young theater audience venues across the country, and just same with Tom Gabbard up here at Blumenthal. They're all just trying to figure out what to do next, and it seems like, sadly, that live entertainment, concerts, anything with an audience is the last thing to come back. I mean, bars and restaurants can open up, and stores and everything else, but the arts, live performance seems to be taking the big hit, so nobody knows when it's going to come back, which is really sad, because there's going to be a lot of kids out there not getting to go places. So, and another show we were working on, a student show at Children's Theater, is postponed until next year too. So, but I am designing now. I'm working on stuff for our touring company. I think the idea is now, whenever we get back on track, let's have a show ready to go. So we're working on that, working on a version of Snow White with 2 actors and some other stuff. So yeah, we're just working on designs and doing presentations. We're also, all the production staff is all taking on this project, much like Tom Birch is doing over at UNCC. He's a designer and works at Children's Theater a lot. He's putting together his own trunk show, or a toy theater show, and so now we're all kind of trying to figure out, well, maybe that's a thing that we can do. That's some direction that theater can move to, is having a smaller theater that you can do on a Zoom camera, or you could do it outside in a park with people around socially distancing. So we're just hard at work trying to figure out what direction we go to, what's next, and in case we cannot all come together and make some magic happen. And theater is very collaborative, and like Gordon said, normally we'd all be around the table switching ideas around, and that's the cool thing over Children's Theater, is just, I can go up to the costume shop to get swatches from costumes if I need to match paints and stuff like that, and everyone's so distant, it's hard to do that, to work on things together. But hopefully a vaccine's coming and everybody can
sorry, Tim, I want to. Yeah, no, that's kind of where I want to finish up here, is talking about, the future here. Before I get to that point, if you guys have, and I think each of you have sort of talked about what you've been doing and maybe some resources. if there are any specific resources that we haven't talked about that you want to give a shout out to that are helpful for your craft, for people that are studying your craft, or ways that you can showcase what you do, go ahead and this is the time, but also maybe send those in to me and we can compile those and add those to this video as a link so that anybody that's watching this that's looking for ways that they can showcase their skill or learn more about it, that they can go ahead and do that. I know you mentioned one, Hali, and Tim, you were talking about Cobalt Studios and things like that. So if you guys want to kind of put together some of those ideas and send them our way, we'll just include it as a link.
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick and just shout out and Hali mentioned as well, but electronic theater controls, this is sort of very niche to lighting. But electronic theater controls, who they're a mass producer of lighting equipment and lighting operating consoles and things like that. They're just ubiquitous in our business. They're everywhere. But I'll just say two things about them. First off, they have a terrific online series that you can get sort of accredited for learning how to work their consoles. And usually it's sort of a paywall thing that you have to subscribe and pay for. They've basically made that entire series available right now online for free to anybody that wants to learn them. So you can get a very, very in-depth look at how their consoles function and work, which is amazing. And their software runs on a Mac or a PC. It's a free download. So there's nothing to stop you there. The other thing I'll say too, just as a shout out to them, they're one of the first theater groups or one of the first theater companies that sort of said, we're going to start making PPE. So they started making face shields almost immediately when the quarantines and the stay-at-home orders started coming down. They sort of shut down everything and started shifting their entire production line over to PPE, which has been an amazing thing for our industry too. So I'll just sort of note them out.
Excellent. Yeah.
USITT, the United States Institute of
Theater Technology.
Theater Technology. Okay, that makes sense. They put out a whole like a month and a half, maybe 2 months of workshops, and I think that they're hoping to like start them again. After I think in June. So I would look out for those. There's a lot of different disciplines throughout the country that are coming and doing webinars basically. And they've been really informative. I've gone to probably half a dozen. And then the North Carolina Women's Theater Festival is planning on doing an all online festival over the summer using live streaming technology, which I sat in on one of their workshops, which was super interesting. So those are the top two I can think of off the top of my head, but I'll send any other ones I think your way, Chris.
Excellent. Appreciate it.
I'm going to shout out for Gaga people. Yes, like Goo Goo Gaga. Gaga is like a really informative movement technique. And this is not just for dancers. This is for every single human that is watching this. It's not about dance. It's just about moving and about understanding your body. And they are offering free classes right now, so go for that. There's also an Instagram page that came up that basically lists every day what classes are. I just tried to look on my Instagram. I can't find it right off, but when I do, I'll send it to you, Chris. Great resource for those of you who are really looking to explore dance. But I think at the end of the day, movement is therapy and movement is healing. And if anyone who, even if you're not a dancer, can just get in a space and move and feel good about yourself. I really think that Gaga People provides that. So if you just look up Gaga People on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, you'll find avenues to get there. And I just think it's probably the best place for anyone as a dancer or just a human who likes to move to go. It always makes me feel good. So, yeah.
Excellent. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. I just want to just kind of close, see how you guys feel. So, theater's been, we've adapted for centuries. We've adapted with the times and our resources and things like that. Obviously, we're headed into uncharted territory. As Tim, as you had alluded to, the entertainment industry, the theaters are probably months away from getting audiences back together in our spaces. So the question is, how do you think, what is the future for your area of expertise? How has this impacted your craft in the short term and also potentially long term? Who wants to start?
I could start real fast. I've been doing kind of like check-ins with some shop manager friends in Mississippi and Tennessee, and just trying to talk about what the future is of fittings. There's already kind of been a movement, body positivity, as well as worrying, thinking about people's personal space, the different comfort levels of people, with theatrical intimacy training coming in. There's also that cross between like, how does that impact a costume shop? And, we're very much right on top of people, and depending on how you feel about your body or people in your space, that's already something that we're trying to take into account as we're being more inclusive of all people. So I think for a costume shop, it's going to be, how do we do a fitting when you want to keep social distancing? So, we don't want to just do modern shows all the time. So it's kind of thinking about how our costume technology, like the technical side, can maybe move toward more exact fittings. So not like, oh, we'll figure this out in the fitting, maybe a little bit more math than not everybody would be happy about, to make sure that it's closer to the actual measurements, thinking about different techniques of how the actors can measure themselves potentially in front of you, maybe a mirroring game of this is how you can measure yourself here. So there's a lot of different ways that I've been brainstorming with colleagues as well as in workshops, and they started talking about this a little bit at the Southeastern Theater Conference before this was larger and a larger issue for us. But I think the design element, the actual act of designing, will still be able to operate in some ways the same, but it'll be being able to execute the design. So this is right now.
Excellent. Gordon?
It's interesting. First of all, it's just personally, it has just been heartbreaking to watch friends and colleagues and others just lose months and months and months of their future work. I mean, it's very hard if you're not, in the industry to sort of see it, and that's setting aside all of the loss that people are dealing with and all of the grief and all of that. From a lighting perspective, it's interesting to think about. We've had these conversations a little bit at UNCC, and how do we have classes in the fall, and what does that look like? Honestly, from a lighting standpoint, it could be probably easiest of all for us to say, well, we can still keep doing what we do. A lot of work that in lighting involves hanging a light way out there somewhere. So you pick up the light, you take it out there, you hang it up, you plug it in. I don't have to be that close to you. We're not necessarily in a business in lighting specifically that we're on top of each other all the time, or we can sort of be very, very mindful of distancing. However, and this is going to be true for everybody that's sitting here in this panel right now, how do you put an audience in the theater safely is the absolute biggest question right now for everybody. And theaters and performance halls everywhere across the country are trying to figure out best practices and new practices, and what is safe, and these guidelines are all coming out. So I think we all love what we do, and we want to do it in front of an audience. We don't want to do it virtually like this. This is a fine outlet, but it's not our preferred outlet. So I think that's sort of the harder thing. I can sit at a lighting console. I've done it many times at Theater Charlotte, where I come in on a Saturday afternoon. I open the place up, I turn the things on, and I sit there for 6 hours, and I program all of the cues by myself. I'm not putting anyone in harm's way by doing that, and that's feasible. And I hang my own lights, and I point all my own things. But once you start bringing an audience in, or once you start bringing performers into a space, all sharing dressing rooms, all sharing green rooms, and then sharing a stage where they're having to vocalize in front of one another, it's how do we keep those people safe? And in that environment, that's sort of the really big challenge that a lot of us are facing right now. Again, setting aside the obvious challenge of the pandemic itself, but just within our industry, it's hard to get our heads around. But from a lighting standpoint, yeah, we could hang lights, we can focus them, we can point them at things, while being relatively safe. But it's not, if we don't have an audience, then it's not really going to be worth it. So
I wonder, and we don't have a writer on the show, but I wonder if we're going to look back in 5, 10, 15 years and be able to look back at this time period and see a collection of performance pieces that are written specifically for what we're living in right now, that only have.
I have to imagine there will be tons of work.
Two actors and.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And just from a scenic painting perspective, it's pretty socially distant anyway. There's many times where I'm the only one, like Gordon, in the theater painting, and which is kind of nice sometimes. But but I can't paint if there's no scenery built, or I can't. What's the point of putting all this together if you can't have an audience? And yes, we could film it and stream it, which we've just been doing some live streams of past shows, which is great. But without the audience there, is it really theater? That's the question that we're going to have to take into the near future and possibly further along. Is it theater if there's nobody there?
Good point. Laz?
Impact on my craft. Major. Short term, I guess everything's been moved to Zoom, which has been both really exciting that there isn't that we are even capable of having this technology that I can virtually see my dancers. But then at the same time, and I've said this, and it's not the same, and like the screen time is not the same, and I think it really sucks, and I hate all of it. Like I signed up to do what I do because I really love, especially, I love choreographing in general, but what I've found from this is I really love the kids and like really miss them. What I found is, as an artist, I think it's always our responsibility to take what comes our way. And I think the talent that artists have is to be innovative. And I think the beauty of what we do is, while we're not able to do things the way that we've always known to do them, we're also the first people that someone's going to turn to figure out a new way to do something, and to do it effectively, and do it in a way that's exciting and makes everyone feel good. So do I want to be back in theater Charlotte, like teaching choreography the way I always have? Absolutely. But I also really have found there's some part of this that that makes me feel that I truly believe in the creative community and our ability to overcome anything. And that if this goes on long enough, we're going to figure out a way to have theater in a way that it might not look like anything it ever has, but it's still going to be incredible, and it's still going to be innovative. And so short term, it sucks. Long term, I validly feel that every single artist has a way through this, and that we're going to figure that out. And so, like, both good and bad, I guess, from my perspective.
Absolutely. People can tighten their purse all they want, but we're kind of artists.
You gotta leave it open for us. We're gonna figure it out.
Right. Any final comments?
Like we were just saying, theater's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's adapted. It's gone through plagues and dictatorships and all kinds of things, and so it's going to continue on. It's just going to look a little different and feel a little different, hopefully just for a little while, and then we'll be able to all come back together and create magic within a shared space. But we'll just have to see what happens.
Great. Thank you all for being a part of this. This ran long, for not being performers, we can talk for a long time but we're passionate people. And that's something that for anybody that has experienced theater and you've talked to anybody that's involved in theater, you know that how passionate we are. So thank you all for being on our show, and we'll hopefully check back maybe in person next time and see how things are going. So Laz, Gordon, Hali, Tim, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chris.
Appreciate having us.
All right, and that is going to wrap up this edition of TC at Home. Thank you all again for being a part of the show. Don't forget Theater Charlotte's Isolation Radio Hour on Wednesday at 7:30. Classic radio shows performed live. We also have our TC Teachables on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Be sure to share our virtual programming with your friends and family. And if you enjoy our lineup, consider donating to Theater Charlotte so that we can continue entertaining you virtually until it is safe to meet with you again in our building. Lastly, please take a moment and reach out to your local and national elected officials, as well as local foundations, and tell them how important the arts are. Arts continue to be undercut across the country, and now more than ever, we need to get the message out about how essential the arts are, not only to our economy, but to our mental health and well-being. On behalf of Theater Charlotte, have a great week. Good night.